or like.
Hello, folks. We'll start to get things rolling. I'm John Flowers. I'm a reporter with the Addison Independent. I have been for the past almost 26 years, and covering the Addison Central Supervisory Union for over 20. And I've been covering also this governance unification effort in the ACSU. And together with MCTV and the ACSU Charter Committee, we decided it would be a good idea to bring the candidates together to the greatest extent possible, have another presentation about the proposed unification vote, or the unification vote, and then have an opportunity perhaps for a little Q&A and exchange with the candidates. And I think we're going to start out with a presentation from the Charter Committee with Ruth Hardy, and then I will introduce the candidates, who will be given an opportunity to introduce themselves, their backgrounds, and why they're running. And then I will have a couple of additional questions for the candidates in the contested races, the Ripton and Bridport. And then, time permitting, we'll have a chance perhaps for some Q&A from the audience and some one-on-one mingling. So with that, I will turn it over to Ruth Hardy.
So much for coming. It's really great to have people here who are interested in this. I'm going to give a presentation that I've given many times. Some of you have seen versions of it, so I apologize if it's a little redundant. Please, I will give you chances to ask questions during it, but I'm going to move fairly quickly so we get to everything. But if you have a question or a comment, please, wave at me and I can clarify anything that needs clarifying. So the Charter Committee started last summer in August, and we started with trying to solve issues that are common in the ACSU, and one of them is the fact that we have declining enrollments, that's the red line, and increasing budgets. This is the trend starting in 2005 and going to the present. So you can see this is not as strong as the statewide trend, but is still a trend in our central supervisory union. And our spending per pupil also is an issue. We have unequal spending per pupil between the highest and the lowest spending district in our supervisory union. There's over a $5,000 difference in what we spend per pupil. And finally, we have an incredibly complex governance structure in the Addison Central Supervisory Union. You can see these are all of our towns at the top. They each have an elementary school board that goes down to the ACSU board. There's an ACSU executive committee. The superintendent reports to all of these. We have a high school board for all 7 of our towns. And the high school board also is in this mix, the UD3 board. So we have 9 school boards that the superintendent has to report to. And then all of the principals for all of those schools report to him. So as you can see, it's a really complex structure. This is the structure that we're proposing with the new Addison Central School District, Unified School District. It's a much more streamlined structure. It's proportionally based on our populations. There would be a board that the superintendent would report to, and there would be all of our towns as part of that one single board. So that's the sort of background of where we're coming from and why we started this process. As most of you know, there was a law passed last year, Act 46, that compels school districts around the state to think about these issues, what problems they want to solve, and how they might solve it. But this didn't just start with Act 46. This has been an ongoing discussion with our school districts for a number of years. And actually, my friend Carol Eccles, who is a former ID4 school board chair, called me this afternoon because she had found some evidence that has been going on even longer than this. So I'm just going to let Carol talk for just a minute about what she found.
Can we get it now?
Go ahead.
So this has been going on since 1963. So this problem people are worried about that we're rushing into, we're over 50 years at it. And the thing that I find the most interesting is that the same issues are in each of these darn studies. And they both take a look at two things. They look at efficiency, and they point to the benefits to the children if we had a much more efficient system because our administrators are spending so much time doing everything else. And then they point to accountability. And they go not only to fiscal accountability, which I think we're aware of because now we don't vote on a supervisory union budget. And part of that budget is set up by certain board members at the ACSU level, and they go out of office, and then some new board members come and vote on it, and it becomes final with a different set of board members that originally looked at it. And then it's in your local budgets, and that's where it stays. And if you have to cut your budget, you usually can't cut that. The other accountability issue that comes up is that the evidence suggests, and I've seen this myself because I've been on Mary Hogan School Board for 21 years and I was chair of ACSU for 8, is that when you have a board that looks at all the children all the time, like the high school board, they tend to form a working relationship together, all right? And they work for the benefit of all kids. The evidence suggests that you do not see that in the supervisory union boards because they're looking at their own town more frequently than they are at the whole picture. They don't have the time to find those relationships. So I have a study going back to 1975. And the suggestion is that it looked at consolidation and said enroll 5,000 students or more for an educational program in new supervisory districts. From early childhood, mind you, they were pretty advanced then, huh? High school. And that board should be governed by a single board of, district should be governed by a single board of school directors with no less than 7 or 15 members. That was their recommendation back in, what did I say, 75. And these are their goals. To provide an improved range of educational opportunities, to improve utilization of human resources available for school operation and governance, to improve utilization of financial resources. Sound familiar? So then we come to I don't even know what this one is, 1984. And they decided, they didn't have any luck with that back then, right? That was too radical. They said, all right, let's see how we can make supervisory unions work better. And, whoops, this is what I was afraid was going to happen. My goal is not to drop anything, okay? So this is what they said. This is part of their study, and they were looking how to make it work better, not how to realign districts, okay? And this is what they said, and I quote, many local school boards indicated that they regard their supervisory union as a necessary evil rather than a necessary tool. In some supervisory unions, school boards do not have a common understanding of the superintendent's functions and have little sense of community with each other. Superintendents are spread much too thin, lack the database to do good planning, often lack a clear sense of direction from the supervisory union boards, and are uncertain as to their authority from local boards. Okay, again. And then, just so you know the number of studies that have been done, 63, 64, 66, 68, 67, another 68, 71, 71, 73, 75. Just a few studies. And then in 1987, there was another one done. Actually, I testified at this one. I was alive and well and running then. And it talks about problems with with schools, with this current structure of supervisory unions. Not responsive to the public. Overlapping district system fosters competition rather than cooperation with school governance. The complexity and confusion of the governance system often clouds the educational purpose of the schools, and on it goes. And their proposal was a little bit different. Get back to the presentation. Okay. It was a little bit different, and it was looking for the same high school board and the other one to be the same. Just let me say, in 91, 92, We had 125 citizens of Addison Central Supervisory Union come to meeting here, and we again looked at the problems with our district. I have all the information here if you want it. Noticed the same problems, same weaknesses as you see here. Came up with some suggestions for change. One of those two suggestions was exactly what's being proposed today. And it went before the Supervisory Union Board had commissioned that study. And the day after they went to vote on it, we had a change in all board members, and it was it. So I just had to say, you know, not a new problem, folks. Nothing that's been looked at in a hurry.
Thanks, Carol. So our current situation with the studying the governance started in 2010, where we had a preliminary study, and then we've worked toward the proposal that we have today through a study committee that was in 2010, a huge community engagement process in all of our communities. It lasted for 18 months with study circles. Many of you participated in them. We hired Superintendent Burrows, who's hiding somewhere here.
I think he's making copies.
Oh, he's making copies. That's what our superintendent does. We got the final red study committee report. We approved an equitable master contract for our teachers. We centralized special education. We had a comprehensive strategic plan approved last year, and this past summer we started the charter committee. So we've worked really concentrated over the last 6 years to move toward a system that is more unified, and this is the sort of final step. The ACSU boards all agreed to create a charter committee that would move toward what's called an accelerated merger. This is one of the options under Act 46. We thought that it fit ACSU the best because of all of the work that we have been doing over the last 6 years. So what the things about the accelerated merger is we must all, in all of our towns, approve this proposal before July 1st of 2016. So it's an all or nothing thing that we all must approve it. This would give us the largest tax incentives from the state, the 10 cents, 8 cents, 6, 4, 2 cents each year on our tax rates reduction over the first 5 years. It would maintain our small schools grants. All of our outlying smaller school districts receive what are called small schools grants. Those will go away if we do not unify. If we do unify, the new district would be able to keep them. And they're at approximately $470,000 that all of our students would benefit from. We would get a $150,000 one-time merger grant to help with the transition, and we'd have clearly, as Carol lined out, enhanced clarity, equity, flexibility, and stability in our system. This was the charter committee. There were 5 representatives from Middlebury, 1 each from the smaller towns. We worked really quickly this fall to create what are called articles of agreement. We worked very well together. I was the co-chair with Suzanne Buck from Bridport, and many of the people up here were also on it, a couple in the audience as well. We worked to create articles of agreement that would form the new district that would work for all of our towns. And I'll go over some of those provisions later. In fact, right now, the proposed board is a 13-member board, the exact same proportions as our current UD3 board, which oversees the high school and the middle school. It is generally proportional representation based on the U.S. decennial census. That is required by the United States Constitution. The 14th Amendment requires equal protection for voters, and so therefore the new board needs to be proportional based on our population, and that is using the U.S. Census data. Each director will be elected by all of the voters of all of our towns. So if you live in Bridport, for example, you can vote on the members for all of the towns, and vice versa. We all vote on all of them. It's at-large voting. They're all 3-year board terms, and there are 7 members from Middlebury and 1 each from the smaller towns. Middlebury has more than half the population based on the U.S. Census, and therefore needs to have more than half of the board seats on the new board. This is the census data based on 2010. So you can see Ripton is the smallest at 588 people, and Middlebury is the largest, is just under 8,500 people. And so these are the numbers that we use to determine proportional representation. One of the things that we had to make sure we did was we followed not only the provisions of the U.S. Constitution, but the provisions of state law for what is a legal school board. You can have no more than 18 board members. Every town must have at least one representative. So because we have such a big gap between the 588 in Ripton and the 8,500 in Middlebury, we had to really work hard to find a board that was proportional. And one of the ways that we were able to do this was to do at-large voting, so that the fact that Middlebury is a little underrepresented on the new board and that Weybridge and Ripton are a little overrepresented on the new board is mediated by the fact that we have at-large voting, that all of the new board members, all of us up here, are accountable to all of you out there, regardless of what town you're from, regardless of what town we're from. So the initial board terms are staggered because we didn't want all 13 members to be up at the same time for re-election. This year, obviously, is the first year for the board, so we have to elect 13 members, and so it's the most complicated. But in the next years, there are 4 who only have a 1-year term, 4 who only have a 2-year term, and then 5 that have a 3-year term. And so next year, we would only be electing 4 members, and then the following year, 4 members, and then 5 members, so it would stagger. So this year is the most complicated, but after that, it just sort of gets into a routine. And we did it alphabetically, to be fair, you can see. I just like this graphic that was in the Addison Independent, so I put it up there, but a school board chalkboard. But that, you can see all the towns and how they're represented. So the financial provision. So are there questions about the board structure before I move on to the finances? Okay, excellent. The finances, all of the property and real estate of our current school boards and school districts would be transferred to the new school district on July 1st of 2017, which is when the new school district would start, based on this proposal. We would also transfer all fund balances and all capital debt. So if there are any reserve funds, those would go to the new district. If there's any debt, or if there are any deficits, they would go to the new district. As would all of the property, including the school buildings, the land, and the desks and computers. All this stuff would go to the new school district. It would go starting on July 1st, 2017, which is when the new school district would start to operate. If the new school board and the voters of the new school district decide to close the school, that property would go back to the town in which the school is located. So it would go back to, I don't want to pick any town, but it would go back to wherever it was located, except for the UD3 property, which is the high school, middle school property that we're sitting in right now. If for some reason we closed one of these buildings or didn't need a piece of property that was owned right now by the high school, that new district would be able to sell it. It would not go to the town of Middlebury. The new district would sell it because we all own it right now, and we would all still own it then. And then all special funds would still be used for the same purpose that are used for now. Some districts have little endowment funds for scholarships, for special enrichment purposes, and they would still have to be used for the same thing. If they're specifically for Cornwall students, for example, Cornwall has one, it would still be used for Cornwall students. So just so you know, those would stay as is. Questions about debt often come up, so I did some extra analysis about debt. This is the estimated debt level for each of our districts. I know it's a little far away, on July 1st, 2017. You can see that the district on the end is UD3, the high school, middle school district. That's the district that has by far the most debt. That is mostly the middle school roof and the lockers for the new town gym. That is the biggest amount of debt. That is owned by all of us right now. So that is not going to change. The district that has the longest term debt is Ripton. It goes out to 2033. I believe it's for their solar panels and their roof. But the debt service on that is only $20,000 a year. That is less than 0.006% of the new budget. So it's pretty much non-existent. The other district that has the most debt is Middlebury ID4, the Mary Hogan School. And this debt only goes out to 2021. All of this debt added together is less than 1% of the new budget. So it's really a rounding error. It's not an issue in our district. It's so tiny, it's not an issue. Other districts, there's a lot more debt to deal with. Our district, it's really not, it's not a significant financial piece of the pie. So with the new merger, we would get tax incentives from the state that add up to about 30 cents over the course of the first 5 years. In addition, just by the mere fact that we're combining all of our budgets, and we would have one per pupil expenditure, not the variation that I showed you at the beginning, but one for all of our districts, that we would all benefit from economies of scale. Especially the smaller districts would benefit from it. And this is the estimated tax rate savings that we would see in the first 5 years of our merger from 2017 through 2022. Obviously, for some towns, it's larger than other towns, but there are savings for all of us, ranging from 80 cents up to $2.80. And this is what it would look like in dollar amounts for if you have a $200,000 home, your estimated savings of your taxes for the first 5 years. This is an estimate only. These are not guarantees of your tax savings. I just want to tell you that. It's really difficult to estimate school budgets. It's really difficult to estimate all the factors that go in. And these are estimates only, and it also doesn't take into consideration some people qualify for reduction in property tax based on their income. It doesn't take into consideration that. So I just want you to know that, but this is just to give you a sort of a general estimate for an average. There are short-term financial efficiencies, mostly in the business and finance and audit oversight. With 9 budgets, it's really expensive to take care of all of those and to do financial oversight and auditing. With 1 budget, it will be a lot cheaper. Board management costs, 1 board versus 9 boards. There's enhanced sharing of staffing and facilities that we'll see. So just right off the top, there's $175,000 of pretty low-hanging fruit of savings that we would see with a merged district. There are longer-term financial efficiencies to be discovered with a streamlined governance system that we would undoubtedly find within the first 5 years. For school closure, this was something that the Charter Committee worked really hard on, both the structure of the board and what to do if there was a need to close the school. The Charter Committee decided that there would be necessary to have an affirmative vote of 10 members of the new board. There are 13 members, so it's more than a supermajority. It's like a super majority that we would need to close the school. There would be a series of public hearings that would need to be held, and at least one of them would have to be in the town where the proposed school closure would be. And there would be a required 10-day public notice of the vote that the board would take to vote on closing the school, which is a longer notice than our regular school board meeting. So on town meeting day, we will all be voting on 2 articles. Article 1 is the provision to unify our school districts. It's, you would say we're voting on a pre-K through 12 school district with a board, a 13-member board, as we've outlined above, the assumption of debt and school property, and that the final report is available at all of your town clerk's offices. It's also available on the ACSU website. And so that's Article 1, yes or no about the unified district, and those are the things you will see. Article 2 is the election of the school board members, and that's what we'll get to next. There'll be 16 members on the ballot. Only 2 towns actually have contested races, Bridgeport and Ripton, but we all vote on all of them. So we made sure that the ballots in every town are the same ballots. The voting times are the same for every town. All of your town clerks have been in the loop and reviewed them. There will be school board members positioned outside of all of the polling places to answer any questions. So if you have concerns or questions, there will be somebody there that can help walk you through it. So we've done a lot of work to ensure that the voters are prepared and informed, and that we assist you as much as we can, because we know this is a complex ballot this year. So thank you very much for your support of our schools. I'm happy to take questions if anybody has questions.
And just one question.
Yep.
On the school closure stipulation there. What about a permutation of not school closure but major change? Let's say a school went to just 2 grades or something like that, and you're splitting up. Does that come under the same thing, or is it purely a closure type of?
So the provision is just for a pure closure, like we're not going to use this school for education purposes, that Addison Central School District doesn't need it or want it anymore, and then it would go back to the town. There could be modifications in how we structure grades or how we use school facilities, but they would still be used for educational purposes. Now, obviously, a school board, to be a responsible school board, is going to bring the public into those conversations, but there wouldn't be that same kind of provision just to change the structure a little bit. Sven?
Do you anticipate that there may be mobility of students among the schools?
So this is a good question, the sort of open enrollment question. Would students be allowed to just go to a different elementary school? This is not addressed in our articles of agreement, and one of the reasons is that the charter committee felt that this was a decision that the administration and the new board would need to talk about, and that it needs to be done very carefully, because it could be chaos if we just say any kid can go to any school. There are obviously transportation issues that would need to be worked out, staffing issues, facilities issues, educational programming issues. So it's really something that the superintendent is really going to have to spend some time on, making sure that it's done in a way that makes sense for the students, the staff, and the schools and their educational program. That's not to say that I don't think it will ever happen, but it's not something that will happen on day one. On day one, the first year, all the kids that go to school where they go now, that's where their school would be. If the conversation would continue from there.
But if you took it just from a neighborhood point of view, some of the schools are closer to town lines than others, so it might make sense on a neighborhood basis for kids to go to a different school. Is that one of the possibilities?
I definitely think that's one of the possibilities. That certainly would be something that the new board and the administration would look at. That's definitely come up, but right now, we didn't address that in the articles, because we felt like that was a larger conversation about how we would want the new school district to work. Yeah?
The per pupil cost will be one for the whole district?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, in building a budget in each school, an administrator will bring it to the board, I assume, through the superintendent.
Yep, probably the way it would work is that the superintendent would ask all of his building administrators to meet this certain budget, or to propose a budget to him, and then he would take it, and his staff at the central office would work on it, and then he would bring it to the board, and then the board would look at it. The voters will be voting on one budget, one per pupil cost, one tax rate. But internal to that, there will be sub-budgets, just like there is with MUMS and MUHS right now. The voters see, when they see the budget, they see the two separate budgets. This is what we're spending on the middle school, this is what we're spending on the high school, but you're only voting on one full budget.
But it would mean that each school's budget is the same per pupil cost, I assume,
Not
based on indebtedness and things like that are different.
Yeah, well, what it would mostly be different is for student needs. If there are more special education needs in one school building, that obviously those would be more expensive. If there are fewer students, if there are special programming things. So it would really be building a budget based on student needs rather than building a budget based on facility needs, or, you know what I mean? It would be building it on the fact that we have these students who have these needs, and that's how you would look at it.
Right. So each school may have a different per pupil cost, in fact.
In reality,
Yeah.
yes, I think that's probably likely, but only one per pupil cost for the district, the
When they
sort
get
of
it all
average.
together.
Yeah. Right now, that's the way it works too. There are some students that are quote unquote more expensive than other students within the same building. Yeah.
Well, maybe a loaded question, but kind of following on that, what is the response to the concern, if I've got it right, from opposition that I've seen to the proposal that, well, crudely put, that Middlebury taxpayers would be kind of subsidizing high-end, small schools, Weybridge, Ripton, basically, that really ought to face the music and close.
I think there are financial benefits to all the towns in the first 5 years because of the tax rate savings and because of the mere ability to merge with one budget. I think that there'll be a lot of work done by the new board and by the superintendent to look at potential efficiencies that would enable Middlebury to move forward without having the sort of subsidizing the small schools. I think there will ultimately be changes in the way that we structure our education in the ACSU and the way that we fund it, but that's something that the new board would have to consider. I think there's a lot of sensitivity to the fact that Middlebury has these concerns and that the smaller towns have different concerns. And we worked through a lot of that with the charter committee, and I think the new board will continue to work through it. Our superintendent is extremely aware of this tug between the towns. Yeah.
I think it came up earlier in the paper of the issue of town-owned buildings on leased school land and what was going to happen in that. I don't think it got answered back then, and I don't know if that's answered now.
So any leases or agreements, contracts that the current districts have would transfer to the new district. So if a town leases property from the school building, or if they hold a mortgage, or if they have some kind of a contract or agreement with a vendor, all of that would transfer to the new district. So any agreements that any of our schools have right now with the towns in which they're located would transfer to the new district. I know, we've dug up lots of really complicated things that we didn't know existed, like there's a sewer line or something in Weybridge, and there's like some property in Cornwall, and so all of us have these complicated things, but they would all transfer to the new district, and then the new district would be responsible for upholding the agreement that the current district has. Yeah?
Do I understand correctly that everybody's got to do the same voting and get it all passed together? So if one town does not go along with everybody else, we're kind of back to ground zero, I guess? And,
Yeah.
what happens down, 3 years down the road, this is all going to come together anyway?
So this, for the accelerated merger, we all have to vote yes. All of our towns have to vote yes to do it. If it fails in one town, it would fail for the whole district, for the whole supervisory union. We would have the opportunity to petition a revote in that town. So if your town didn't vote yes, we could get citizens there to ask for a revote, and we could revote it. As long as we've all voted yes by July 1st, then we meet the deadline for the accelerated merger. If we're not able to do that, the charter committee would remain in existence, and we would come back to the table and we try to figure out what our next options are. There are other options that we could do. They have lower financial incentives. We could do a modified merger, and that would mean some towns would be in and some towns maybe not. So we could look at that option. But ultimately, by 2020, the state would like all boards to have merged, all school districts to have merged and study the merger. And if they can't merge, then the State Board of Education would come in and sort of look at the system that we have right then and make recommendations for how to merge our schools. It's possible, likely even, that all of our schools would be asked to merge anyway, and then we wouldn't get the financial incentives, and we would lose the small schools grants. And so we would be in the same situation that we're proposing right now, but we wouldn't get any of the financial benefits for doing it.
So at this point, we're doing this locally versus 4 years down the road, the state will tell us what to do.
That's the likely scenario, and I have the chair of the education committee here who can probably confirm that. So yeah, that was the goal of Act 46, was to say we'd like you to come up with something locally and propose it and vote on it, and if you can't do it, the state really is going to come in and say, well, this is the best way to do it. So this is our opportunity to say this is what we want locally and to get the tax benefits for doing so. Leonard.
Going forward, I kind of understand here come March 1st, counting ballots, but going forward, are these ballots for the budgets and for voting for representatives going to be commingled? Or each town going to count each ballot out separately so that everybody know who's turning the budget down and who's putting who in what position? Or is that going to be like UD3 is right now, they're commingled?
Right, so I don't know that I have the answer to that question. I think that one of the situations that we've found is that we're kind of breaking new territory, and we're not the only district breaking new territory. I think there are 5 supervisory unions that are voting on this on town meeting day. So a lot of the provisions about how is this going to work with the ballots and everything, we literally were working with the state and the Secretary of State's office, the Agency of Education, and our legal counsel to figure it out this time. And so the next time, I think we will end up having to work with them, and I think maybe the legislature will clarify a few things with the new districts. But right now, the vote is not going to be commingled, so that we can see if it passed in each of our towns and who voted for what, which candidates in each of our towns. Eventually, maybe it will be commingled because we'll be one district, you know, and that, like UD3.
Yeah, well, since UD3 was doing it, why was the issue going forward if you're going to have one district, why couldn't they still be commingled? What was the state's issue there on that department?
Well, for this year, we've had to have them separate.
Absolutely, I understand this year.
Okay, so like I said, I'm not sure I know the answer going forward. My assumption is that they will be commingled, but I think that I would have to defer to the Agency of Education, the Secretary of State, and our legal counsel. So sorry, I can't quite answer that, but I think we'll kind of figure that out as we go along. All right, well, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over to John.
I guess I'd give an opportunity for people to sit in front here so you aren't so cramped.
Are you guys? I think Brian's moving over there. Why she sit? You can sit here. Be nice to my chair.
Oh, I'll be nice to you.
So I guess I'll just recap first the towns and the seats that are the people who are running and the length of the terms that are being that are up for grabs. In Bridport, we have 2 candidates vying for a 1-year term. Those candidates are Rick Scott and Suzanne Buck. In Cornwall, Peter Conlon is the lone candidate for a 2-year term. In Middlebury, there are 7 candidates running for 7 positions. The folks seeking 3-year terms are Lorraine Morse, Josh Quinn, and Steve Orzek. And for 2-year terms are Jason Duquette Hoffman, Ruth Hardy, and 1-year terms are being sought by John Reese and Victoria Jetty. And in Ripton, there are 3 candidates vying for 1 3-year term. Those candidates are Jerry Shedd, Brian Alexander, and Perry Hansen. In Salisbury, there is Jennifer Newseeder running unopposed for a 1-year term. And Shoreham, Nick Costin is running unopposed for a 2-year term. And in Weybridge, Christopher Eaton is running unopposed for a 3-year term. And if all of the candidates are seated at this table, I guess organizationally it might make best sense to go from left to right, and I would invite everybody to say a little piece. It's not going to be strictly timed, but say a little bit about your background in civic affairs, a little bit about yourself and why you're running. So, beginning with Lorraine.
The most nervous one to go first, okay. Hi, I'm Lorraine Morse. I'm from Middlebury. I have been a 14-year member of the ID4 Elementary School Board, and for 9 years I've also served a dual purpose as a member of the UD3 Board as a Middlebury rep. For most of my 14 years I've also served as a delegate to the Central Supervisory Union Board. I have served as both a member of the RED study and the current Act 46 Charter Committee. I'm running because I think my experience, especially serving on both boards, will serve me well on the new board. And I'm also running because I think going forward there's a certain amount of uncertainty, and I think a lot of trust is going to be needed between all the board members. And I've worked with almost everyone other than the two new people, Jen and Josh, I'm sorry, Josh. And I think that the relationships are going to be very important going forward as we try to work together to make this all work cohesively. So I'm very excited about serving all the children in the district, and I thank you all for coming today.
I'm Victoria Jetty, and compared to Lorraine, I'm very much a newbie. Having served on the ID4 board for just 2 years as part of the Finance Committee. I have 3 kids currently in the Middlebury school system, 8th, 4th, and kindergarten, and got involved originally just because I was so impressed at the administration and my experience at Mary Hogan and at the middle school, that it was just something I felt like I wanted to be a part of. So I'm looking forward to moving forward, if that is what the voters decide, and being part of the new board, both from the financial perspective and also in trying to make sure that all of the students within the whole ACSU are sort of represented going forward.
My name is Jason Duquette Hoffman. I am a Middlebury resident. I have 3 kids currently at Mary Hogan School. First grade, a 4th grader, and a 6th grader who will be going to middle school next year. I'm closing out my 2nd term on the ID4 board, the Mary Hogan School board. Prior to that, I also was on the Development Review Board and Planning Commission in Virgins. My brother and sister came through the Middlebury school system when they were younger, and I'm running for this board because I think that this unification effort gives us an opportunity to really deliver the best educational system we can for all the students in our community. So every one of my kids' friends from Middlebury and from the surrounding area in Addison County really deserves to have the opportunity to have the best education they can have, one that fits their learning style, that supports them with all the resources that we can bring together as a community. And I think that we have an opportunity to do that really well with this if we apply really thoughtful and careful leadership to this effort going forward, and I'm going to do my best to try and make sure that that happens. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Nick Colston. I've been on the UD3 board for Shoreham for the last year. I was born in the UK, as you might detect. Lived in Canada for 10 years, went to McGill, France, Venezuela, and the US. We've had 5 kids who've been exposed to different educational systems around, including the French BAC, the Option Internationale, the IB, and traditional US education. All that to say I'm a believer in world citizenship and also, of course, in the World Language Program. I strongly support our Vermont small schools, and I've had 3 grandkids in Weybridge and Shoreham, and I find them very caring and supportive, but also critical for small town life. And I will do my best to defend the small schools. I find their mission very critical, and I think adding pre-K will strengthen their role too. Act 46 is not perfect. Too many lawyers involved. But it's probably the best we can get now. So let's move forward and continue to retain the best of what we've got now. Thank you.
I'm Ruth Hardy. You've already heard a lot from me. I'm clearly really into this stuff. I've spent a lot of time doing analysis, and my background's in school finance, so I have a lot of experience in the school finance and policy area. I'm from Middlebury. I'm the current chair of the ID4 board, and I come from a long line of amazing ID4 board chairs, and I'm just very grateful to have that as a history in Middlebury. I have 3 children, and next year I will have one each in each of the schools in Middlebury, Mary Hogan, Mums, and the high school. So I have a lot of skin in this game, and I'm really supportive of this unification effort, and I'm really excited to work with all these people because they're all a great group, and we're really lucky to have them. So thanks.
I'm Jerry Shedd. I live in Ripton. I'm a 7th generation Vermonter who has decades of experience with single boards in New York State, both as a student and as a teacher. I've been a member of the UD3 board for 11 years. If you have a system with 9 school boards and each one has 50 or 60 policies, it makes governance kind of messy. So in 2009, I founded the ACSU Policy Committee. I've been its chair ever since. And we've made significant progress in aligning and updating these policies. I've been a long advocate for single board governance. I've testified before the House Education Committee and also the Senate Education Committee in that regard in Montpelier. I have unique experience, I think, in my background with single boards and also my interest in policy. I think those would be an asset to the new single board.
Hi, Chris Eaton from Weybridge. I am an alumni of Mary Hogan and MUHS. Currently the board chair in Weybridge. I was 3 years on the UD3 board here at the high school. And I worked in the charter committee with most of the people up here, which was a lot of hard work, but it was good work, and I think it's just the start of a lot of hard work to come from us and a lot of community engagement as we move forward, because it's going to take a lot of work to make sure we do provide a good, solid educational foundation for all the kids and all the communities. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Josh Quinn. I'm a Middlebury resident. I have 3 children, 2 of which are in Mary Hogan. The third will be there next year. I don't have any school board experience. I started to get interested in the school world once Act 46 was passed. Volunteered for the charter committee, was not selected. And I'm just excited to be involved. I think it's a pretty pivotal time to make sure that as we move forward, we can do it the right way, in a thoughtful way. And excited to be here.
My name is Rick Scott. My wife Robin and I live in Bridport. We've lived there 15 years. Our 2 youngest children are Middlebury High School students currently. The others have passed through in the past. I own and operate a small business, a small systems integration business. We have 6 employees. I've been, my background, my entire professional career has been in business, and I think I bring a good financial perspective to the school board position, having a good P&L and financial responsibility experience. I've served for 7 years. I started on the Bridport board. I served as vice chair and chair on that board. I'm currently the UD3 rep from Bridport, and I've served for the entirety of that 7 years on the ACSU board as well. I'm currently the ACSU chair. I've also, I've put a lot of myself into this. I've enjoyed the work thoroughly. I've served on many ancillary and committees and subcommittees of this, including the original Red Study Committee and the Exploratory Committee before that. I served as chair early on for both of those committees. Most recently, I've been involved, I was on the steering committee for the strategic planning process and on the committee that developed the mission and vision process. And I think I bring a lot of experience to the table, and I'd like to apply that to the formation of the new school district going forward.
I'm Brian Alexander from Ripton. I probably have the most facial hair of anyone in the room. I have experience on both Ripton and in the rest of the towns of the ACSU. I've been on the Ripton board for several years, a Ripton delegate to the ACSU for several years. I was on the Red Study Committee, and I've also been working with Jerry on the Policy Committee. I have a lot of experience in the town of Ripton, everything from being the town blogger to being one of the founding members of the New Ripton Historical Society. I also have a lot of work in Middlebury, where I'm one of the leaders of a storytelling movement in Middlebury. I'm on the MCTV board. I can wave at Dick right now. And I've consulted with the Ilsley Public Library. All of this has to do with my professional background as well as my personal. Not only do I have 2 children who have gone through the schools, in fact one of them is in his junior year in the high school right now, but I'm a professional educator and consultant. I work with hundreds of colleges and universities literally around the world on the topic of the future of education. I help colleges and universities understand what's going on with technology, demographics, finance, and how these things are changing. I love the opportunity here to bridge my personal and my professional lives together. If you can vote for me, if you can elect me to this board, I hope to accomplish a few things. One is, like my world-traveling colleague here, to advocate for small schools. Not just because I'm from Ripton, but because I think these represent a powerful part of Middlebury and Vermont's democratic tradition. I also want to work for student agency and voice, to make sure that students have the ability to become who they are, to discover their voice, and to have some greater role in their education. Along with that, I'd like to support increasing personalization of learning. I know the State Agency of Education is behind that. I'd like to see more of that. Then last but not least, to increase what we do with technology, both to give our students a better chance at jobs and to help them learn more. Thank you.
So I'm JP Reese. I live in Middlebury. You'll see me in the paper as John Reese, but I'm pretty sure I'm on the ballot as JP, so either one, whatever Reese. I currently serve on the UD3 board. I've been on that board for 2 years, finishing up my 3rd year. I have 2 kids at Mary Hogan, a 2nd grader and a 4th grader. In my professional life, I serve as Associate Registrar at the Community College of Vermont, so I've got some interest in what happens with all of our students, not only during their time with us, but sort of what happens kind of after they get out of our system. And I'm excited and looking forward to being part of the new board, because it seems to me that the unification movement and the opportunities that we have with the new board represent our best shot at bringing a high quality, fair, and equitable education to all of our students and all of our communities, and that's a passion of mine and something that I hope to promote.
My name is Suzanne Buck, and I've lived in Bridport almost 30 years. I lived there with my husband and, well, was with 2 children. My oldest, Brittany, went through the school system, and now she's out in Kansas, and our son, Garth, will be graduating from Clarkson University this spring in a mechanical engineering field. My background is I've served on the Bridport board for many years. I've been a delegate to the ACSU board. I'm a special educator, so I bring yet a different voice to the table. I understand the assessments and what goes on with students within the school building and what these kids are looking for and how difficult sometimes it is for them to be able to access their education. I also have worked with many of these members here, and I feel we have a great working relationship. But being a teacher, I can help them understand what the assessments are saying, where we're weak in certain areas, where we can build better programming for the students. So for me, it's all about education for the kids and what we can do better to help them be much more successful when they leave our buildings. The world is constantly changing for them, so where the world is when they start as kindergarten students, it is not where it will be when they graduate. And we have to be able to make changes and corrections and move our programming so that when they graduate, they're ready to take on the world. So I thank you and glad you all came.
Good afternoon. I'm Peter Conlon. I'm from Cornwall. I've had 3 boys, 2 of whom have been through the school system, one who's a freshman. I'm currently Cornwall's representative to the UD3 board, which oversees the high school and middle school, and I'm the chair of that board. And I've been an advocate for unification long before Act 46 came along and threw some money at us. And I really came about it from 2 perspectives. One was somewhat of a frustration in my own community. I'm from a small town, and sort of watching people at school meetings and whatnot bring up ideas of gee, how come we're not doing this with Weybridge? How come we're not doing that with Shoreham? And not so much an unwillingness, but an inability to sort of bring programs and other things together, because just the basic, you can start right off with the basic difficulty of getting 10 citizen board members together in one room to discuss a common problem like busing. And just having seen that and been frustrated with the inability to make things happen in that respect. And also, I've been on the UD3 board for 11 years as well, and that is a board that is exactly the same makeup as what's being proposed in unification. And as Carol mentioned in some of her comments about studies previously, it really is a board that I've seen work well together and seem to be very effective with a global view of all kids from all towns. And I think that if we can broaden that to K-12 rather than 7-12, this can really be a great school district. Not that it isn't already, but we can really move forward faster, efficiently, and very effectively. Thank you.
I'm Perry Hansen, and I'm from Ripton. And as a member of the Ripton School Board over the last 4 years, I've learned much about small rural schools, as well as how to appreciate the complexities and nuances of the Addison Central Supervisory Union. By serving on the ACSU Negotiations Council, Strategic Planning Committee, and most recently on the Charter Committee with a number of my colleagues here. As a Peace Corps volunteer, secondary school teacher in Kenya, after graduating from Middlebury, that's when Kennedy was getting us all into the Peace Corps, I learned a lifelong lesson about community through the Swahili notion, Harambee. Let's all work together. The strategic plan is a Harambee that focuses on educating our children, involving our communities, and developing better ways of delivering education. As an educator, I believe in student-centered active learning and that we can always improve education. We have to educate every child. We can work smarter. We must support our teachers. I also believe in educating the head, the heart, and the hands. To teach lifelong learning skills, to internalize compassion, and to learn to appreciate the dignity of labor. Harambee. Let's all work together to create a model education system in our school district, including small rural schools. That is the envy of Vermont. Thank you.
Everyone covered, I think? Everyone who's here? So I have an additional question here to pose of the candidates who are involved in races, that being Bridport and Ripton, and I guess starting alphabetically with Bridport, I was going to ask this question of you candidates. So if the governance merger referendum passes on March 1st, you will suddenly be your town's lone public education representative for Addison Central. How will you fight or lobby for your school's best interests? And what will be a global budget for all schools within the union? And I guess from left to right, I'll start with Jerry. I'm sorry. Sorry.
And Suzanne?
From left to right, yes. Suzanne, Rick, sorry.
Thank you, John. I think that, John, I apologize. Would you hit it one more time for me, please?
Sure. As suddenly your town's lone representative on this unified board, you'll have to represent your town's best interests, right. And there'll be probably some tough financial discussions, and you'll have to lobby for your school's needs. How do you intend to do that?
The first thing I would say to that is Currently, 56% of the students in Bridport are already represented by one person on the UD3 board. So that already exists. And what happens on the UD3 board is town lines disappear. Granted, the students are in 2 buildings versus 7 outlying buildings, but nonetheless, our conversations are about the school student body as an entire entity. And I can see that happening after unification as well. The conversation about third grade curriculum or technology for elementary schools involves all the students across all the buildings. As it's done now, it's a siloed conversation, and every town has different challenges, most of them financial, in accomplishing the things we want to accomplish. World languages is a good example of that. That's been a frustration throughout the supervisory union for a number of years now, when it was decided that would be a great thing for all of our elementary school students. Currently, 2 schools have been able to accomplish that. A third will be doing it this year. The rest of us, and I can speak specifically to Bridport's experience, we come up against an excess spending threshold that prohibits that from happening. So our kids have a disadvantage coming into 7th grade when they don't have that experience that other kids do. And causes trouble not just for the Bridport kids in that example, but for the kids that are going to be involved in the remediation process in the 7th grade that have had that experience. So it's costly across the board for everyone. I think that as a rep from a small town, it's less about me fighting for the rights of the Bridport school as it is for all schools, especially with the equalized tax rate and our responsibility to taxpayers. Because of the fact that we're all paying the same tax rate across the board, I feel as though that an individual representative is representative of all taxpayers, not just the Bridport taxpayers in this example.
Suzanne?
As Rick said, we would be, being a member of the new board, we would be there advocating for all students, not just for Bridport students. Bridport, yes, has been at a disadvantage due to the ceiling on our budget and not being able to meet the needs that we would like to have our students have, the things that they want, or would make their education more global. When my kids were in school, they worked in agreement with Middlebury College, and they had after school foreign language, but that was only sorry, I've got a cold. That was only available if there was a language student from the college that was willing to come out and work with the students. So it was there sometimes, wasn't there all the time. So it's a patchwork method of ensuring that students are able to have more of an enrichment program. Being as a member of the new board, you're not there just for the town that you represent, you're there for all students. So the conversation changes. It's no longer just what does Bridport students need, but it's what do all of our students need. So if a goal of the district is that all students would be able to enter the middle school having some foreign language experience, then how do we make that so that all schools within the new district can have a foreign language program? How do we go about doing that? Does that mean that we hire somebody and they spend a day a week in each of the schools? What does that look like? How does that work for the students? How does that enrich their program? So the conversations really are much more global, but they're also looking at the outcomes that we want for the students, whether the outcomes are where they end at the end of 6th grade going into the middle school, or if it's the outcomes of where they need to be when they leave the high school. So those are the conversations. They're much more global, but yet they're looking at all of our students because we're representing all students and not just necessarily the students that we come from in that town.
Thanks. Now, moving on to Ripton and Jerry, again, just to rephrase, it's about lobbying for your specific local schools' interests as part of a global budgeting process.
I would support what Suzanne and Rick have just said, and in fact, I don't like to use the term representative because I don't think it accurately reflects what we're talking about here, both in terms of board members' relationship with the voters and with the students. As Rick and Suzanne have just said, we're going to be working on the welfare of all the students, not just the school that happens to be in the town where we live. The law doesn't say anything about representation. It talks about a residency requirement. And that's what this is. We're elected, we're talking about a board where everyone is elected at large. So I'll certainly be thinking about the students in Ripton if I'm elected to this board, but I'll also be thinking about the students in Middlebury and Bridport and all the other towns. Just as we do on UD3. I think Peter made this remark not long ago, that if you quizzed UD3 members quickly, name the towns that your fellow board members are from, you might not get 100% because we don't think about that. We have work to do for the welfare of the taxpayers and the welfare of the students that we're responsible for, and we know, I know when Chris was on our board, he was a real asset, but I don't think, well, Weybridge, he has a Weybridge point of view. It doesn't make any difference, and on this new board, it won't make any difference. What's important is the quality of the people who are on the board and their willingness to work together for the benefit of the taxpayers and the students in the whole unified district.
Brian?
This is a great question, and it's one I'd like to tease out a little bit. I agree that this is going to be a very convivial board, a collaborative board, one that builds on our history of working together. I do disagree with Jerry, though. I think representation is really crucial to this. I think that many people on this board, not just myself, will see themselves as coming from a town, and not just as a fact of residence, but as part of their identity. And I think that when you were speaking before of fighting for small schools, I think that's part of it, is that there's a sense of local identity and community that matters. That said, I don't think this is an either-or question. I think this is a both-and question. Much like bringing a really lavish dinner to a dinner party doesn't detract from anybody else's, but makes everybody else happy. I think one way I can do this is by building on what the Ripton School has been doing for quite some time. You might not all be aware of this, but the principal has been very entrepreneurial. She's been able to tuition in students from over the mountain, from Hancock, to grow our student base, to bring in some revenue, and also to enrich our student body. I think our town is pretty nimble that way and can really expand and do better. And I think that will enrich the ACSD as it goes forward. I think also it's really important on this new board to really deepen community engagement. I think it's exciting here that Bridport and Ripton are clearly showing the evidence of an engaged community, that we actually have contested races. That's a sign of vibrant, active, engaged democracy. I think we can do more of that. I think it's important for this new board to reach out to everybody in the ACSD community, to bring voices that aren't currently being heard into the mix. And I think that will let us better manage what our schools do. I think we can also really push easily for what you were describing before, is inter-campus or inter-school collaboration, where teachers and support staff, parents and students can work better across these town lines. I think that's a both-and move, not an either-or. That doesn't put Ripton in competition with Weybridge. That gives us both more things that we can do together. And lastly, I think if we push for improving our technological infrastructure, if we push for greater broadband, if we push for better cell phone coverage, I think that will improve all kinds of things as part of our ACSD. That'll increase the attractiveness of the area for young families and kids, of whom we don't have enough. That will increase collaboration and will improve life for us all. That's a very long answer to a very good question.
Barry?
Thanks. I think I view it a little bit differently in that it seems to me the challenge in the short run is to deal with local politics. There are a lot of people in Ripton who are pretty upset about this, what they view as rapid change. And I think we have to be very sensitive to that. And I think some of the things that we put into the charter are good because it makes it hard to close the school, because there are some people who believe in Ripton that, oh, as soon as this goes, Ripton School is closed, it's over. So I think we have to be really sensitive in the short run to help folks think that through, and then realize what I learned very quickly on the Charter Committee, that they're wonderful Middlebury people who really don't care if I come from Ripton or anywhere else. They just want to do the right thing. And I think that kind of thing is, it takes a while for a community to say, oh, it's okay. The world will not end when we do this. And I think that will allow us then to really focus on the children and make sure that we get the best possible education for every kid.
Well, I had a second question which mainly dealt with backgrounds, and I think everyone was able to very keenly share how their background would help in their understanding and performance of the duties on the board. And instead, I would open things up to questions from the audience, if there's any specific candidate that you'd like to question, or any general questions about the unification process.
My name is Barbara Saunders. I was on the Charter Committee, so I really don't have a question about the Charter Committee. I think that it's a great idea. I was more concerned about the candidates' views on early education and where that fits. Every school board in ACSU really voted to pretty significantly restrict families' access to pre-K education throughout 166. And I'm wondering if that view might change as the new board forms, and how you see pre-K education working into your future plans.
Sure. Yeah, I can take a stab at that. Being on the UD3 board, we have not been dealing directly with pre-K, but I have followed the issue to some extent. You know, the new law that goes into effect in September is called Universal Pre-K, but school districts are not required to take all students who might want to come. It has to do with the number of available slots. And on the other side of it, it's voluntary on the part of parents to enroll their children. So I don't know where the term universal comes from, but I would certainly, I outlined 4 things that if I was elected to the board, I would want to prioritize. 2 of them right away in the first year. You know, the first year, it's sort of a shadow board because the other 9 boards continue. So if you vote yes, you get 10 boards instead of 9 for 1 year, and then 9 disappear and it's just the one. So during that 10-year, I had a couple of things during that first year, but in the second year, after pre-K has been going on for a year, I would really like to prioritize that and see how we can move toward really universal pre-K. I think it's very important for 4-year-olds and perhaps 3-year-olds to be involved in that, all of them. And I'm concerned that the students at that age who need it the most might be the least likely to have their parents want to enroll them. I'm not certain about that, but that's a concern. So I would certainly want to look into that. That would be one of the 2 things that I'd like to look at in the second year of the board, once we take control.
I'm definitely a proponent of the pre-K movement. When my kids were younger, there was no preschool in Bridport. There was just the beginnings of a kindergarten piece. And so I actually tuitioned my students to Shoreham, to the preschool there. And it made a huge difference in both of their lives, in being able to interact with other students, to start their education process in that manner, because they got to work on social games and interactions much more than they would have been able to do at home with myself and our dog and our cat at that point. So I see the benefits not only in that aspect, but also in the piece that when our son was born, we didn't know it right away, but he was born with a learning disability. And if we had had a pre-K program that was full-fledged going in Bridport, they would have picked up on that immediately, and he would have received extra services at that point. Instead, we wasted almost 4 years of his life before it was finally acknowledged, and then he went into the EEE EEI program, where he received wonderful services, and that was the piece why I went back into school and became a special educator. But I really truly believe that for many of our students, that the earlier we can start, even just doing social games and social skills with them, it makes them much more successful as students as they move through their years of schooling. But we have to get kids into the schools to do that, and that we have to work with parents, or we work with private providers that have those programs already. But either way, they need those services.
Thank you for the question. That's a really very, very germane one. I too also support more pre-K to the point of it being universal. I think there's a couple of reasons for this that I could add to the mix. One is that if we can have that throughout the ACSD, then that will, among other things, make us much more attractive to young families and people thinking about raising kids. That'll make us much more desirable, and I think that's a very powerful element. The second is that building this out in our first or second year will give us a chance to exercise our newly created collaborative muscles, because this is definitely something which requires a lot of inter-school collaboration. And the last point, I think you both raised the crucial element of this, which is that we may try for universal pre-K but not get everybody. One reason is we have a deepening divide of socioeconomic divisions in the United States and in Vermont in particular. And I think it's important for us to cross that. This is my point before about deepening community engagement, about expanding our democratic engagement to involve as many people as possible. And I think we can do that to get more kids involved, more families involved in pre-K.
Yeah, just what, Barbara, I think to your point on Act 166, that conversation is still ongoing. In fact, it's on the agenda for next Tuesday's executive committee meeting. There's a matter of complying with it, and there's a matter of how we do best for all the kids around the school. I think it's a two-part process. So the existing boards are going to continue to work on that for the short term, and I can see that. The sentiment of all the board members is we'd like it to be universal. We'd like every kid, especially those that have the most need for it, to have access to that. And how to do that is the question to answer.
And I would just suggest you look at our neighboring school districts who
Yeah.
are much more progressive around this.
Understood.
And just very briefly, because I think most of the points were covered, the excitement I had in thinking about the new school board is that it really is going to give us a chance to work together in a way that we cannot do now. We can leverage a much larger budget, and we got a whole, 15 months to really pound through a solution to this kind of thing, and it was on my list of top priorities.
Any other questions?
John, can I just raise something that, your first question to the candidates in which there was a race, and then actually Barbara's question on pre-K, I think, also fits into, is I'm really hopeful that we can get past some of the questions that, like that, like the initial question about, how will we each represent our individual schools and that, because I think what this unification process allows us an opportunity to do is really take a step back and, with all of our collective resources, really reimagine how we're delivering education across this community. Because each of the towns in this proposed district has a unique character, its own flavor, its own things that it can offer. Each of those schools and the people that are in those schools and supporting those schools have something unique to offer. And what we can do if we're all working under the same umbrella is to really take a look at what those environments have to offer all of our students. I have 3 kids, and each of them are completely different. And any other parents in this room, I think, probably can know exactly what I'm talking about, right? One of my children might work really well in a large classroom of 20 or 25 kids and really find that engaging and interesting. Another one of my kids might really need a much more intimate environment or a completely different kind of environment than what they can get at the school that they're at now. Whether it's placing children in age groups that fit better rather than what we can fit in a particular building or support out of one individual community, or whether it's providing an educational environment that suits kids with specific kinds of learning needs and really supports them more directly. I think joining together in this kind of governance structure gives us the opportunity to really accomplish those kinds of things in a much more innovative, much more flexible way, if we choose to pursue it that way. The alternative is to not really think of it that way, to kind of stay in our silos and keep our thinking back in this model of education that we have now, which is do everything that we can scrape together enough cash in our local town to do in our one little school. I think what Brian and Perry have been talking about, and others here, about the value of small schools is absolutely correct. But that doesn't mean they have to look like they look now. And I think universal pre-K is part of that conversation, right? So that I think I'd like to see us move our conversation beyond, will they close my school or that school? How do we keep this school open? To more, how do we want our kids to be able to learn? Is there a place for every student of every ability, whether it's physical, intellectual, emotional ability? Does every student in our community have a place where they can learn in the best way that they can? And we are going to be much more effective at delivering that kind of an educational system working together than we are ever going to be in our own individual towns.
Exactly.
Just to perhaps explain a little bit of background, which led to my question, I was thinking, what if you had a large constituency in one of the towns that felt that science instruction or archaeology was a big enough priority that they wanted to increase staffing in that particular subject at that school? I would imagine it would have to be cleared by the greater board, right, in order to devote those resources to that situation.
Maybe, maybe not, right? I mean, to some degree, like, the administration is going to be administering those budgets at those individual school levels. My hope is that, I'm a Middlebury resident. I'll be on the board ostensibly as a Middlebury rep, but that's not the way that I'm going to be thinking about this. We have community members who are saying, look, we really want a Lego robotics program here because, we've got 8 kids in this class who show a real aptitude for it, and we think we can expand their learning. Then we ought to talk about that as a school community, right? And maybe that's something that other schools might have never thought of and might want to come in and take a look at it too. But we can pilot programs in small spaces when we have more resources together. So, I think it's time for us to really expand our thinking and our conversations with each other about what this really means for us as an educational community.
Yeah, John, I would agree with what Jason is saying, the kind of creativity that he's expressing that could be applied when you have this flexibility. And in answer to your question, John, and the question you raised, if people in a certain neighborhood or a certain town had an idea, if that's a good idea, all the other towns ought to be able to do it. And having said the word towns, again, I think the whole paradigm shift that we're talking about here is that towns cease to exist when we do this, and we have one large community. It's a unified system now. If I can just go back to that again. When I go to the commencement, there's one graduating class that comes from this whole system. One superintendent, one unified board 7 through 12. It's only the elementary boards that are still separate in their own silos. So it's completing that unification process. That's what we're talking about here, just completing that unification process that's half done already and has been for decades. Once we do that, this kind of creativity that Jason is talking about can absolutely happen. Ideas can come forth in one area and be used in other geographic areas. It's just a matter of being creative and applying it.
John? Mm-hmm. So what Jason refers to is also what the state is pushing for in the personalized learning plans for students. And they are requesting that all students write a personalized learning plan, which basically is what the student would like to learn, how they would like to learn it, and then how they would show what they've learned. These are conversations that are going on across the entire state. Some are really struggling with the idea of a personalized learning plan and what it means and how do students show proficiency in a subject matter or in a particular area. But it's a way for the students to take what they're learning within the 4 walls of, say, Middlebury High School or MUMS or wherever they might be, and expand it outwards. I work with FFA students across the state, and those students, for their personalized learning plans, they can write in it a marketing plan. They have a beef herd, and they're marketing their animals. They're taking them to market. They're selling them. They've got that whole plan down. Other kids are maple syrup producers, and they can tell you how many taps they need to produce X amount of gallons of syrup and what they're going to sell it at and what the weather needs to be. But they've got these different pieces of professionalized learning plans that they are putting in and bringing in to their schools and using their science from their classrooms in a real-world experience to move their classrooms outside of the walls and move them forwards. I see as we move forwards, looking at the education of all students, that it makes this a little easier. I mean, my daughter, when she was in high school, she would drag kids out to Addison County field days. And she just posted a picture of it with a friend of hers that, you know, she'd drag them out there and they'd learn how to wash cows and she'd teach them how to show them, and then they'd go in the show ring with her. So she was taking her passion for something and expanding it to others. So I see this as a great opportunity for us to be able to allow our students, all of our students, to take their passions and expand it, show others, and then also increase their learning.
Hear, hear. Good stuff.
I would like to compliment all of you for feeling willing to spend your time dealing with education for all of us. I'm very impressed with everyone's credentials as I listen to you speak. It's wonderful. And what can happen today is incredibly exciting. I hope all of you will forget the buildings, concentrate on the education, which many of you have mentioned, and figure out wonderfully creative ways to deal with what has to happen next. We have a huge society that's in a very chaotic situation with lots of problems, and the children that walk out of it need to be really good. So the rest of us can get older and sit in our chairs. Anyway, I'm very impressed with all of your qualifications and with your willingness to do this. I served on school boards myself 20 years, so I know it's not an easy thing to do all the time. And it's wonderfully exciting, and I love your talk about creative ways to do things. It'd be really, really easy to stay in the same buildings and do what you've been doing forever. But if there's any support ever in our public, like there is today for being different, you should take advantage of it. Don't waste it. There are lots of wonderful things you can do. Pre-K education is incredibly important. Think about taking the kids in kindergarten, first grade out of your buildings. Put them in preschool buildings. Make them like home. You've got the ability to move kids now. Schools are going to have to be emptied out. Some of them have to be done differently. There are wonderful pre-K programs in this town and in some of the other towns under caregivers. But the work that's been going on here for 30 years to make preschool education one of the best in the state of Vermont should not be wasted. Take advantage of it. You can use what's already in place and put kids in it. Don't try and stick them in a kindergarten room in your buildings. There's one right there. But you can think that way, as she says. Kids need to work outside of the buildings. They need to be doing programs with their hands and differently. The way we've educated them for years is all right for some things, can be part of it, but you need to be thinking differently. And you have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to do that. Don't waste it. So I'm very encouraged listening to all of you. It's wonderful that you're willing to do this, and we're all going to benefit. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Perhaps this is a good time to, Mr. Representative?
Yeah, so Dave Sharp, Chair of the House Education Committee. I'm going to get emotional. I cannot tell you how gratifying it is to be here today. In our wildest dreams, sitting in a golden bubble, trying to look out on the landscape across the state and envision what might be good things for the kids across the state as we move forward. And the comments and the energy and the possibilities here in this district are really exciting. Give me energy to go back to the golden bubble and keep working on things for kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Perhaps this is a good time to stop talking up here and have some mingling opportunities with the candidates. And thank you all very much for coming. We appreciate it. And don't forget to vote on March 1st.
Thank you, John. Thank you all.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for moderating.
Were you able to record pretty well for this?
Yeah.
I was banging on the mic the whole
Well,
time.
you get a new recorder. This is where we hold our meetings.
It does. It does. That's